The average person listening to this, if you're looking at preparing your daughter for sports, in case they get injured, how do we truncate recovery times? How do we have the best outcomes? How soon after your surgery for your initial injury did you start moving and getting back to activities of normal living? Reva, it is awesome and it's an amazing honor to be here with you.
Thanks for having me.
You got injured, but I don't want to start there. What I want to start is when you first started training with us, when you first walked into Pride Athletics, what was your mindset?
So the first day that I trained here, I had you. We were doing our pre-testing, and it totally kicked my butt. I was completely overwhelmed with the level of difficulty, and at that point, having done gymnastics for quite some time, playing soccer for quite some time, I thought that I was pretty strong compared to my peers, and I think my mindset on that completely shifted when I got here. Just because I didn't realize that despite being strong, I wasn't necessarily, or despite being in shape, I wasn't necessarily as strong as I think I could have been. So when I first started here, some of my big goals were to get more in shape for soccer season, to get quicker. And I think just to have an outlet from COVID, because I started in 2020, to do some more conditioning, not at home and in a more guided setting.
Yeah. And thinking back to that evaluation space, you had the strength aspect of things and being really focused on the performance. But our pivot was, well, let's talk about prevention. Mm-hmm. What have you come to know now about the proactive nature of training in the assumption that you might get injured?
Yeah. So having been injured, the training for me was crucial in my recovery process and how I approached the injury. Yeah. I think even my surgeon said both times, like, you are starting in a really good spot strength-wise, and I felt that way. Despite the injury, I didn't really feel like anything was wrong. So I think that, yeah, starting the strengthening early was really crucial in making me feel more safe when I was on the field. I felt like I could push myself a little harder when I was on the field just because I didn't feel like injury was ever at risk. And yeah, even after the injury happened, I still don't feel like I did anything wrong. I feel like I prepared myself as best as I could.
So talk about like your first ACL injury.
So I first tore my ACL in January of 2022. It took over a month to find out that I actually had an ACL tear. Yeah. When I went to my pediatrician, they said they thought it was patellar tendonitis. Yeah. And I was up and walking the day after it happened, or the day that it happened. It was a little sore for a couple days, and then I was basically back to normal. Yeah. I didn't go back to soccer just because I wanted to make sure that nothing was wrong. And then I think 3 weeks after it happened, I finally got an X-ray and an MRI, and they confirmed that it was torn. But even at that point, I was still doing everything. I was still strengthening on a regular basis. We went down in like weight, and I didn't do as much agility stuff, but I didn't feel like my abilities were hindered at all.
Yeah. And it's funny because, we've talked, and so my research and studies and really the focus of the ACL injury prevention nature. And it's funny to me because in my thesis, I wrote about you, if you do X prevention, eventually you get to a point where, after tearing an ACL, the musculature is so strong around your knee that you don't necessarily need the ACL. Mm. And I think if it wasn't for you wanting to play soccer again, surgery would have been ruled out.
Yeah.
The average person listening to this, if you're looking at preparing your daughter for sports, the idea really is looking into, in case they get injured, how do we truncate recovery times? How do we have the best outcomes? How do we reduce swelling? How soon after your surgery for your initial injury did you start moving and getting back to activities of normal living?
Within a week or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was on crutches for the first week, and then after that, I was in a brace, but was moving well. I started doing stairs again, which was cool because
How long?
I think 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. And I think what people don't get is like, you're not an anomaly. It's you were prepared, right? And, we'll joke around here like, man, she's like that bionic bunny. Like she just gets injured and just pops back into it. And it's really remarkable to see how your preparedness really utilizing the proactive nature of training and how that's influenced your recoveries. It takes time and dedication. It takes focus. It takes really a passion for self-health. Can you talk about how you felt when you got injured the second time?
Yeah. So it was definitely more frustration than anything because I had stayed very regimented with my workout routine. I was implementing a lot of injury prevention exercises in my daily exercise routine, and it was something that I knew right away. So it was a little bit of a blessing and a curse because I knew right away what had happened, and I knew that it would mean taking me out of soccer for another 9 months.
Yeah.
But I also just kind of felt like I was prepared for what was to come. I got back in the gym in the next couple of days to start strengthening again. I obviously changed my routine a little bit. I texted you,
Yeah.
and you gave me some stuff to do, so I appreciated that.
That's cool.
But yeah, it was more about keeping my strength up this time and preparing myself for the recovery than it was sadness or frustration with myself, because it's hard with injuries like that to not blame yourself, even though I know like I did everything necessary to prevent the injury.
Yeah.
But injuries happen.
Yeah.
I also play really hard, so
Yeah.
I put myself at a higher risk, which I wouldn't change anything
Yeah.
because that's just how I play.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was more frustration than anything. I don't know. I just didn't. There was never a point where I was questioning what I was going to do.
Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to injuries, and I think your mindset's one thing, but like I think a lot of times we forget about the frame of mind and then how that affects our emotional being, our physical healing. And then if you're looking at a road with optimism, you're generally going to do better. Can you talk about just your mental well-being, mental health, things you were thinking, what really influenced and kind of changed the direction of just, I'm going to attack this with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind as we honor the Coach Hardball. So yeah, talk about that a little bit.
When I was doing the prehab for my first injury, I was warming up here. I was not in a good mood just because I was upset with what had happened and didn't know where to go from there. And you came up to me and you said something along the lines of, you've prepared yourself for the injury unknowingly. It's not anything you did wrong, and you're going to see that you benefit from this after you have the surgery and going forward. And yeah, when you said that to me, I was kind of like, whatever, that doesn't mean anything to me right now, but yeah, exactly. In the weeks to come, right after surgery, I totally notice it. And looking back now, I feel like I totally did prepare myself.
Yeah.
And I think that I would have been in a completely different place then and now had I not started training ahead of time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it really changed the trajectory of my recovery.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when people get injured, they stop doing whatever it is that they were doing. And the assumption is I did something wrong. Mm-hmm. In the ACL perspective, after the injury, prehab is such an integral part of the recovery process, because when you get injured and then have to have surgery, what you go into it with is what you're going to come out with. You're not doing anything for 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Sometimes it's 6 or 7 weeks before you get surgery, and muscles start atrophying.
Yeah.
The appropriate thing is what you did, is really looking at it and say, okay, in this time when I'm waiting for surgery, what can I do to at least maintain the musculature so that I don't waste away and then have a hard recovery. But the cool realization is you get into the point of going, oh man, like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
And you've seen the benefit of that proactive work that you did prior to injury and then prior to surgery.
Yeah. And I think you talk a little bit about how injuries can impact both mental and physical health.
Yeah.
I started seeing a sports psychologist before surgery.
Yeah.
In between when I got hurt and when I had surgery. And I think that was pretty instrumental in my recovery as well, because it's a slow process and you start to feel better physically after a while, but you still kind of feel trapped for me, it was trapped from doing what I love, which was soccer. And I think that mental health is just as important as physical health. And I noticed that more than ever when I got hurt. And so I think that it is really important to focus on both mental health and physical health as they can kind of influence each other.
If you were emotionally and spiritually healthy, most things generally go better, right? I would have never went to talk to somebody when I was your age about stuff I was going through. I'd be like, nah, man, it is what it is.
Yeah.
When I've recently in my adult life jumped into therapy, because it helps you organize and create a process to your emotional and mental healing. And not to really harp on the dark side of things, but a lot of athletes find themselves in trouble mentally
Yeah.
when they face injury, and people start using drugs, people start, doing risky things. Some people commit suicide. And those are like the spaces, I think, where having a good village really impacts really success. After injury too. All right. How did it happen? One.
I think it was the beginning of April.
Yeah.
I joined a club team at Michigan, and we were doing our spring, winter workouts. And those workouts involved 8v8s at high velocity. It was later in night. I had a scrimmage earlier that day. So it was my second training of the day. And I actually went into it. I texted my mom before, and I was like, I'm a little concerned because I just haven't done twice a day since gymnastics. And she was like, well, get it out of your head now because you don't want to be thinking about that during the game. And I did get it out of my head.
Yeah.
And it was the same non-contact injury. Yeah. I just ripped a shot from outside the box, put all my power into it, and all that power went into landing sideways on my knee. And it popped, and I knew right away.
Okay.
And thankfully, because I was in my hometown, my dad came and picked me up, and I got my brace, and I went back to school. Yeah, it was hard because I had a lot of school stuff that I had to focus on at that time, and so I couldn't really focus on the injury.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that helped, but I also kind of knew, because I knew what happened, I was able to kind of plan the next couple months. So I was like, okay, logically, I won't be able to get surgery until June because I was out of town all of May. And that kind of just helped me push it out of my mind to get my school stuff done. It was a weird feeling because I just didn't think that I would be one of the people who had a repeat injury.
Yeah. Yeah. But the cool thing too, though, is it really sucks it happened. Mm-hmm. But I think you were able to push it out of your mind due to your proactive preparedness.
Yeah.
To the point where the injury maybe bothered you for the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But then leading up to that and surgery, you're just walking around, going upstairs, doing your thing. So how's your mindset after surgery number 2?
Yeah. So I think this surgery was a little more difficult. It was different tendon that they took. So it felt mostly the same right after. The surgery went smoothly. It was a little more painful in the first couple weeks, but I think my biggest takeaway from this was how grateful I am to have movement and to be able to move, because I didn't think about it as much previously because I was still in school when it happened the first time. This time I was basically at home for most of my recovery, it's still going, but I just, being able to move, I feel like it's such a blessing. Yeah. And I know that I'll get back to that point, but it's also something that I have to take day by day because I don't want it to happen again.
Right.
And you make so much progress in the first month.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm in a good headspace, and I think I'm in a better headspace than I was last time because I had college scholarships and stuff to deal with last time. I don't see many downsides to this except that it's going to take me out of soccer for 9 months, and it's actually increased my interest in doing sports medicine in the future.
Okay.
And given me more of a framework of what I want to focus on.
So you're 4 weeks out from surgery. Mm-hmm. You got full range of motion, right? You're not wearing a brace. You're not taking medication. You can generally walk with minimal pain, no pain.
No pain.
How does that make you feel?
It's weird to hear people say that I'm further ahead than I should be.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling. Yeah. It makes me feel like I prepared correctly and I'm doing the right things. It's difficult to still be patient with it because despite being so far ahead of where I should be, it's still an 8-month journey. Correct. And that timeline doesn't change.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel good about where I am. It gives me a chance to do other things during the school year, like coaching soccer, getting more into what I want to do with my career, which I've realized is sports medicine and injury prevention. So yeah, I feel like I'm in a good spot.
Yeah. The other piece I would love to really discuss is you really haven't had pain medicine as a part of your journey with ACL injuries. How has that benefited you, do you think?
I was on pain meds for a little bit after surgery, which is normal. And after that, I think it was more of a mental strengthening thing. I was icing a lot and I was only doing as much movement as Joe told me I could do and as much as I felt like I could do. But I think, like I said, it gave me a better framework of how much of a blessing it is to move without pain, and it made me feel again good about the strengthening I had done before.
Yeah.
And I also feel like pain is kind of inevitable when you're trying to get better at something and when stuff is healing. And I don't know, I think it also gave me a little bit of a better mindset towards when I get back
Right.
to soccer. Like being able to push myself through fatigue because I know it'll benefit me in the end. And yeah, I knew I didn't want strong pain meds for a long time because I didn't want to become reliant on something else because I felt like I was strong enough to do it on my own.
I mean, ACL injuries are long journeys. They're 9 months, 12 months to some capacity. And a lot of times people are on pain meds till month 3, month 4. But then there comes in the potential dependency. But it's just cool that 4 months out, you're like, 4 weeks out rather, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm not taking pain meds.
Yeah.
I'm doing good. And it's overall good for your body. And it's a very holistic approach to your overall health. What's the greatest disappointment in these 2 journeys?
The greatest disappointment, I think, is just being away from the setting of soccer for so long.
Yeah.
I would say that soccer and sports in general have just been such a big part of my life and have been kind of my escape from school and from other stressors in life. And so while I can still watch it, it's hard not being a part of it in the same way. And I just have come to love the sport so much and just want to play every chance I get.
Yeah.
So I think that makes it really hard to be patient with the recovery just because I want to get back so soon and I just like my mind wants to kick a soccer ball.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I would say the biggest disappointment is just being pulled away from the sport and the people that I love being around.
What's the greatest thing you learned about yourself?
I would say my ability to just kind of reconnect with myself. I think I wouldn't have started therapy if it wasn't for this journey. And I think that it's given me the ability to be more thankful and more appreciative of the little things.
Yeah.
Because just because it's an injury doesn't mean that my whole life is affected by it. And in the long run, it is a small part of my whole life. And it's made me realize that there are other things outside of soccer and sports. And yeah, I just don't think I would have realized that if it wasn't for this.
Yeah. And that's the beauty in adversity. It's the perspective. Well, if you have the perspective, or if you're going to look and focus on the opportunity to learn versus what's happening to me. So when you look at your story, right, and how you share your story, what are some takeaways that you would really like, I guess, share with young people and what they should focus on should they go through this journey?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing would be knowing the importance of overall health. And while you can be physically fit, if your headspace is different than where your body's at, injuries can happen and it's not the end of the world. And the work you put in is also the result that you get.
Yeah.
So putting a lot of work and focus and dedication into my strengthening and my injury prevention, while it didn't prevent the injury, which happened, I can't change that. It did and is currently changing my recovery timeline, changing the amount of pain that I'm in, and making it so I'm more able to do other things.
Yeah. Reap what you sow.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reap what you sow. What does peace mean to you?
One of the things I've learned from therapy is that you can't stop yourself from being stressed out or having negative thoughts or just becoming overwhelmed. But I think peace comes from being able to deal with that before it takes over your brain completely and becomes a physical issue. So yeah, for me, peace has become doing something with the negative thoughts in my head and pushing them off to the side and being able to work through them
Okay.
rather than that becoming the forefront of my mind.
What do you think is one of the most important tools learned through therapy that you can attribute to your recovery journey?
This time, journaling has been a really big one.
Okay.
Last time, it was more the breathing exercises to kind of get myself to calm down. But yeah, journaling has been really cool to be able to kind of write down what I'm feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
And then I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, or 3 things that I'm looking forward to. And that's really nice to look back on.
Yeah.
Because even though you can tell yourself that you've made progress, a certain timeline, being able to see that progress and see where you were at a certain point is really helpful to make you more appreciative of the things you've overcome. It seems so simple and kind of cliche, but it has been really helpful for the past couple years.
There are journeys. We don't go through this life alone. And often I look at influence and what's influenced me. What's one of your most influential people? And who was that person to you?
I would say recently it's been Simone Biles. I think that's because she's recently opened up about her mental health in general and how she's kind of overcome deficits in her mental health and stuff like that. And I think that I can relate to her a lot because I started out in gymnastics, and I think gymnastics was super influential to my mentality towards sports and my drive to do better and just my overall ability.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting to see a gymnast who, and gymnastics is not a sport where mental health has been talked about in the past.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting and really cool to see a gymnast who is at the highest stage and she's opened up about her mental health and really, I think, changed the scope of gymnastics in a way because a lot more gymnasts have come out about their mental health and it's a very demanding sport. And so it completely makes sense. But
if I'm a young kid at home, I want to be you. I want to be a gymnast. I want to compete at soccer at the highest levels. What's one aspect of the training journey that you can leave us with?
Yeah, I would say it's the work you do behind closed doors that matters more than the performance. I think that the biggest thing for me is I used to really get down on myself for making mistakes in games and at practice, and I would go home and repeat that same play that I messed up multiple times until I was tired, and not to a point where I was pushing myself past safety, but just enough to make me feel like I was doing something to get better. And I think a lot of that comes from a drive to want to get better. But I would say that the work that you're doing when nobody's looking is much more important than any mistake you make on the field.
Yeah, well said. Reva, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me again.
Awesome.